Winter, a time of festive cheer, glistening snow, and cozy nights by the fire. But beneath the surface of its serene beauty lies a darker side, a side shrouded in shadows, where icy winds carry whispers of terror, and the frozen landscapes become the perfect setting for nightmares. Tonight, we delve into the cold grip of fear with 4 true winter horror stories that will chill you to your core. These aren't your typical tales of urban legends or folklore. No, these are real accounts. Testimonies of people who faced the unexplainable, the sinister, and the deadly during the coldest months of the year. From a snow-covered cabin hiding unspeakable secrets to a lone traveler who vanishes without a trace, every story will leave you questioning the safety of those quiet winter nights. So, as the frost creeps up your window and the night grows colder, make yourself comfortable, but not too comfortable. Because in the world of winter horror, the chilling winds might be the least of your worries. Turn off the lights, pull your blanket tight, and prepare yourself for stories that prove the most terrifying monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're lurking in the snow, waiting to be found.
Winter in the Canadian Rockies is as breathtaking as it is deadly. The snow falls thick and fast, muffling every sound and creating a strange, almost sacred silence. For Jake and Lily, this silence was the allure. After months of stress and city noise, they'd chosen this isolated cabin to disconnect from the world. No emails, no phone calls, just them and the wilderness. But the wilderness doesn't let you forget how small you are. It watches, it waits, and sometimes it takes. The drive up the snow-covered trail was treacherous. Jake's truck slipped and slid on the narrow road, the tires barely gripping the icy surface. "Are you sure this is safe?" Lily asked, her voice tense as she clutched the door handle. Jake chuckled, trying to mask his own nervousness. "It's an adventure. Isn't this what you wanted?" Lily sighed, her eyes scanning the endless stretch of snow-covered trees. She didn't reply, but Jake could feel her unease. The cabin appeared suddenly, a dark shape nestled among the towering pines. It looked old but sturdy, its wooden beams dusted with fresh snow. A stone chimney puffed faint smoke into the frigid air, a sign that the property manager had started a fire for them. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting. A roaring fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of pine wood filled the air. The furniture was simple: wooden chairs, a small dining table, a worn but comfortable couch. "It's perfect," Lily said, her earlier tension easing. Jake smiled, relieved. "Told you." They spent the evening unpacking, cooking a simple dinner, and toasting to their little escape. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Jake woke to the sound of wind howling against the cabin. For a moment he thought it was a dream, but then he heard something else, a faint scratching at the window. He sat up, his breath visible in the cold air. The fire had burned down to embers, and the room was dark. The scratching came again, more insistent this time. "Lily," he whispered, shaking her shoulder. "Do you hear that?" She stirred but didn't wake. Jake got out of bed and crept to the window. The frost made it hard to see, but there was something out there, a shadow moving between the trees. "Probably just the wind," he muttered, trying to convince himself. He threw another log on the fire and went back to bed, but he didn't sleep. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world of glittering snow and clear blue skies. Jake stepped outside to gather firewood and froze. Footprints. They were massive, far too large to belong to a human. They started at the tree line and circled the cabin, stopping just beneath the bedroom window. "Jake, what's wrong?" Lily's voice startled him. He turned, his face pale. "There's something out here." Lily followed his gaze to the footprints. "It's probably a bear," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. Jake shook his head. "Bears don't walk like that. Look at the stride. It's too long." Lily shivered and hugged herself. "Let's just stay inside today." Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As the sun set, the unease in the cabin grew. Every creak of the wooden beams, every gust of wind made him jump. That night, he set up a camera near the window, determined to catch whatever was out there. Around midnight, he woke to the sound of something heavy moving outside. He grabbed the flashlight and crept to the window. The shadow was closer now, standing just beyond the clearing. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its eyes glowed an unnatural blue. "Jake, what are you doing?" Lily's voice was a harsh whisper. He turned to her, his face pale. "It's watching us." The next morning, Jake retrieved the camera and played the footage. At first, there was nothing, just the empty clearing and the swaying trees. But then the shadow appeared. It moved with a deliberate, almost predatory grace, stepping into the frame and walking toward the cabin. It stopped inches from the window and stared inside. "Jake, turn it off," Lily said, her voice shaking. He did, but the image was burned into their minds. The snowstorm returned that night, fiercer than before. The cabin shook under the force of the wind, and the shadows outside seemed to multiply. The first bang on the door made Lily scream. "Stay here," Jake said, grabbing the fire poker. The banging grew louder, more insistent. Then came the scratching, long, deliberate strokes against the wood. Jake opened the door and swung the poker wildly, but there was nothing there. Behind him, Lily screamed. He turned just in time to see the window shatter. The shadow was inside. Jake and Lily ran into the storm, the freezing wind cutting through their clothes. They didn't know where they were going, only that they had to get away. The shadow followed, gliding across the snow with unnatural speed. They reached the ridge where the ground dropped away into a steep canyon. "It's coming!" Lily cried. Jake turned to face the shadow, the fire poker trembling in his hands. But the shadow didn't attack. It stopped at the edge of the clearing, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Then it smiled, a terrible, jagged grin. The ground beneath Lily gave way, and she fell into the void. Jake's screams echoed into the night. Jake was found days later, frostbitten and delirious, mumbling about the Watcher in the snow. Lily's body was never recovered. The cabin remains empty, a dark stain in the pristine wilderness. Locals say the Watcher still roams the ridge, waiting for its next victim. In the shadow of Dead Man's Pass, where the snowstorms never seemed to end, there stood a forgotten lodge. Locals avoided it, and travelers passing through never stayed longer than a night. The lodge had a reputation, a dark one. There were stories of people who checked in but never checked out, of strange lights in the windows long after the building was abandoned, and of voices that echoed through the halls even when the wind was silent. Kara and her friends didn't believe in ghost stories. When they found themselves stranded in the area during a freak snowstorm, the lodge seemed like a godsend. It was warm, dry, and stocked with enough supplies to last until the storm passed. They never should have gone inside. The storm hit suddenly, turning the winding mountain road into an impassable wall of ice and snow. Kara, Evan, Sam, and Lily were on their way to a winter retreat, their car packed with food, blankets, and a guitar Evan insisted on bringing. When the car slid into a snowbank, they had no choice but to abandon it. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and they needed shelter. That's when they saw the lodge. It loomed out of the blizzard like a ghost, its dark silhouette barely visible against the swirling snow. The building was massive, with towering peaks and windows that glinted like eyes. "This place looks creepy," Lily said, shivering. "It's better than freezing to death," Kara replied, leading the way inside. The door creaked open, revealing a grand foyer lit by a massive chandelier. The air was oddly warm, and a fire crackled in the stone hearth. "Looks like someone's been here recently," Sam said, frowning. But the lodge was empty. The group settled in, grateful for the unexpected refuge. They found canned food in the kitchen, blankets in the closets, and even a working generator that brought the lodge to life. For a while, it almost felt cozy, but as the night wore on, strange things began to happen. It started with the mirror in the foyer. Kara was walking past it when she noticed her reflection wasn't moving in sync. She froze, staring at the glass. Her reflection stared back, its eyes cold and unblinking. Then it smiled. Kara stumbled backward, her heart racing. When she looked again, the reflection was normal. In the living room, Evan swore he heard footsteps overhead. But when he and Sam went to check, they found nothing but empty hallways. Lily complained of whispers in her ear, faint and unintelligible, like someone speaking from far away. By midnight, everyone was on edge. The next morning, Kara decided to explore the lodge. She hoped to find some explanation for the strange events, perhaps a caretaker or another group of stranded travelers. Instead, she found a journal in the master bedroom. The journal belonged to a man named Victor Hale, the original owner of the lodge. His entries began innocently enough, describing the construction of the building and his excitement about opening it to guests. But as the pages went on, the tone changed. "Something is wrong with this place," one entry read. "The workers complain of strange noises. One of them swears he saw someone walking in the woods, but there's no one else for miles." Another entry, written weeks later, was even more disturbing. "The guests are disappearing. First the Thompsons, then the Grays. No one remembers seeing them leave, but their rooms are empty. The staff are terrified. I am terrified." The final entry was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "The lodge is alive. It feeds on us. I can feel it watching, waiting. If anyone finds this, leave now. Burn it down if you can." Kara slammed the journal shut, her hands shaking. By the time Kara returned to the others, the storm had worsened. Snow piled against the windows, and the howling wind sounded almost human. She tried to tell them about the journal, but they were distracted. "There's someone outside," Evan said, staring out the window. Kara joined him, squinting through the snow. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then a figure appeared, a dark shape moving through the storm. It was impossible to tell if it was a person or something else, but it was heading toward the lodge. The group locked the doors and windows, their earlier confidence replaced by fear. The figure never reached the lodge, but the sense of unease remained. That night, the shadows in the lodge seemed to stretch and move, creeping across the walls like living things. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with disjointed words and phrases. Leave, stay, help us. Lily broke down in tears, convinced the lodge was haunted. Kara didn't have the heart to tell her she was probably right. The group decided to stay together, gathering in the living room with their backs to the fire. The tension was palpable. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind sent their hearts racing. Then the lights went out. Panic set in as the room plunged into darkness. Kara fumbled for her flashlight, the beam cutting through the black. That's when they saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the light, its form barely visible. It wasn't human, that much was clear. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The group froze, their breath caught in their throats. The figure took a step forward, then another. Kara screamed, and the flashlight flickered. When the beam steadied, the figure was gone. By morning, the group was unraveling. Lily refused to leave her room, muttering about the whispers. Evan paced the foyer, clutching the fire poker like a lifeline. Sam tried to fix the generator, but it was beyond repair. Kara went back to the journal, desperate for answers. She found a page she'd missed before, one that described a ritual to banish the lodge's evil. But the instructions were vague, and the cost was high. One must stay behind, the journal read. The lodge demands a sacrifice. Kara's blood ran cold. With no other options, the group decided to perform the ritual. They gathered in the grand foyer, lighting candles and drawing symbols on the floor as described in the journal. The whispers grew louder as they worked, the air heavy with a sense of impending doom. When the time came, Kara stepped forward. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. The others protested, but she silenced them with a look. "This place is evil. If we don't stop it, more people will die." Kara stood in the center of the symbols, her heart pounding as the others chanted the words from the journal. The air around her seemed to crackle with energy, and the shadows on the walls began to writhe. Then the lodge screamed. The sound was deafening, a guttural roar that shook the building to its foundation. The shadows converged on Kara, swallowing her whole. And then, silence. The storm cleared, the snow stopped falling, and the lodge seemed to exhale. Evan, Sam, and Lily stumbled outside, their faces pale and their bodies trembling. Kara was gone. They never spoke of what happened at the lodge. Years later, the building was demolished, but some say the land is still cursed. And on cold, snowy nights, travelers claim to hear whispers on the wind, calling them back to Dead Man's Pass. Maya had been a long-haul truck driver for nearly 5 years. She liked the solitude of the open road, the steady hum of the engine beneath her feet, and the vast landscape stretching endlessly in every direction. It was a quiet life, and that's how Maya preferred it. When her dispatcher called about a last-minute route through Montana, she agreed without hesitation. The forecast predicted heavy snow, but Maya didn't mind. She'd driven through blizzards before and prided herself on keeping a cool head in tough situations. But nothing could have prepared her for the storm that waited on that lonely highway, or the whispers that came with it. The sun was already setting when Maya started her route. The snow had begun to fall lightly, a delicate dusting on the road. Her truck, a hulking 18-wheeler, handled the conditions with ease. Maya turned up the heater and settled in for the drive. She had a thermos of hot coffee, a playlist of her favorite classic rock songs, and the road all to herself. The first 2 hours passed uneventfully. The snow grew heavier, but it wasn't anything she couldn't handle. Then she spotted the hitchhiker. He was standing on the side of the road, bundled in a tattered coat and waving frantically. Maya slowed, rolling down her window just enough to speak. "You okay?" she called. The man's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice trembling. "The storm's not natural." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" The man shook his head. "Just go. Don't stop. Don't listen to the whispers." Before Maya could ask anything else, he turned and disappeared into the woods. Shaking her head, Maya rolled up the window and drove on. The man was probably just a drifter, she told herself, rambling nonsense. Still, his words lingered in her mind. By the time Maya reached the base of the mountain pass, the snow was falling in thick sheets, making it nearly impossible to see. She slowed to a crawl, her headlights illuminating only a few feet ahead. Her CB radio crackled to life. "Maya, you there?" She grabbed the mic. "Yeah, I'm here. It's getting rough out here. Storm's worse than we thought. Might want to find a spot to pull over and wait it out." Maya glanced at the clock. She was already behind schedule. "I'll push through for a bit longer. Let you know if it gets too bad." The radio fell silent. Maya tightened her grip on the wheel, her knuckles white. The snow seemed to swallow the sound of her engine, creating an eerie stillness. Then she heard it, a faint whisper, almost too soft to notice. She froze, her eyes darting to the empty passenger seat. The whisper came again, louder this time. It sounded like a voice, but she couldn't make out the words. Maya shook her head. "Just the wind," she muttered, trying to convince herself. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. When dawn broke, Maya found herself stranded in the middle of the highway. The snow had piled up overnight, blocking the road ahead and behind. She'd radioed for help, but the signal was weak. "Rescue's on the way," the dispatcher had said. "Sit tight." Maya sighed and leaned back in her seat, staring out at the endless white. The world felt smaller now, closed in by the storm. Hours passed. The whispers returned, growing louder as the day went on. Sometimes they seemed to come from the radio, other times from outside the truck. Once, she thought she heard her name. She stepped out of the cab to clear her head. The cold hit her like a physical force, biting through her layers and stealing her breath. She scanned the horizon, but there was nothing, just snow and wind. Then she saw them, figures in the distance, barely visible through the storm. They stood motionless, their shapes blurred by the swirling snow. "Hey!" Maya called, waving her arms. The figures didn't respond, they didn't move. Maya's stomach turned. She backed toward the truck, never taking her eyes off the shapes. When she climbed into the cab and shut the door, the figures were gone. Darkness fell quickly, and with it came the storm's fury. The wind howled, shaking the truck and rattling the windows. The whispers grew louder, filling the cab with a dissonant chorus. Maya turned up the radio to drown them out, but it didn't help. The whispers were inside the truck now, insistent and unrelenting. She glanced at the side mirror and froze. The figures were back, closer this time. There were 3 of them, their outlines faint but unmistakable. Maya locked the doors and grabbed the tire iron she kept under her seat. Her heart pounded as she stared out into the storm. One of the figures moved, gliding toward the truck without disturbing the snow. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The figure stopped just outside her window. For a moment, there was only silence. Then it pressed its face against the glass. Maya screamed. The face was pale and featureless, its eyes black voids that seemed to swallow the light. She swung the tire iron at the window, but the figure was gone. When dawn came, Maya was still alive, but barely. She hadn't slept, and her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. She decided to leave the truck and try to find help. With a backpack full of supplies and her tire iron in hand, she stepped into the storm. The world outside was a frozen wasteland. Snow drifts towered above her, and the wind cut through her like a knife. The whispers followed her, growing louder with every step. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the figures again, gliding across the snow. They were faster now, closing the distance between them. Maya broke into a run, her boots slipping on the ice. The whispers became a deafening roar, and she could feel the figures closing in. She stumbled and fell, the tire iron slipping from her hand. When she looked up, the figures were standing over her. Maya woke to find herself back in the truck. The storm had passed, and the world was eerily still. Her radio crackled. "Maya, are you there?" She grabbed the mic, her voice shaking. "I'm here. We've been trying to reach you. What happened?" Maya opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. She could hear the whispers again, faint but unmistakable. She looked in the mirror and saw the figures standing in the distance, watching her. Maya turned off the radio. She knew now that the storm wasn't natural, and neither was the silence that followed. The blizzard had taken something from her, though she didn't know what. The village of Frost Hollow was a place few ventured to during the long winter months. Nestled deep in the Alaskan wilderness, it was surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains, isolated from the world when the snowstorms rolled in. Legends of the frozen veil, a cursed phenomenon said to swallow the unwary, had been passed down for generations. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, a swirling wall of snow and ice that appeared without warning, trapping souls in a place where time and reality unraveled. No one knew if the stories were true, but no one dared to find out. That is, until Anna arrived. Anna was a journalist chasing a story. She'd heard whispers of the frozen veil in an online forum and knew it was the kind of legend that could make her career. She arrived in Frost Hollow on the last bus before the storms made travel impossible. The village was as desolate as she'd imagined. Snow-covered rooftops, narrow streets lined with shuttered windows, and a handful of residents bundled in heavy coats, moving quickly to avoid the biting cold. Her contact was a man named Elias, an elderly local who claimed to have seen the veil and survived. "You're wasting your time," Elias said when she met him in the dimly lit tavern. "The veil isn't just a story, it's a warning." "That's exactly why I'm here," Anna replied, her breath fogging in the cold air. "I want to understand it." Elias shook his head. "Understanding won't save you. The veil takes what it wants." Despite his warnings, Anna pressed for details. He finally relented, telling her of a clearing deep in the woods where the veil was said to appear. "If you go looking for it," Elias said, his voice grave, "don't expect to come back." Anna set out at first light, armed with a camera, a notepad, and enough supplies for a day's trek. The snow was knee-deep, and the cold was relentless, but she was determined. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds her boots crunching through the snow and the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. Hours passed, and the trees began to thin. Ahead she saw the clearing Elias had described, a wide expanse of snow surrounded by ancient pines. She stepped into the clearing, her breath catching as she noticed the temperature drop sharply. The air was heavy, oppressive, and the silence was absolute. Then it began. The snow around her started to swirl, rising into the air as if caught in an invisible wind. The swirling grew faster and faster, forming a spiraling wall of ice and snow, the frozen veil. Anna's instincts screamed at her to run, but she couldn't look away. The veil was mesmerizing, a hypnotic dance of light and shadow. And then she heard the voices. The voices were faint at first, like whispers carried on the wind. But as Anna approached the veil, they grew louder, clearer. "Help us," one voice pleaded. "Stay away," another warned. Anna raised her camera, her hands trembling as she filmed the swirling mass. The veil pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the air around it shimmered like heat waves on asphalt. She stepped closer, ignoring the rising sense of dread. "Anna," a voice called, startling her. It was her mother's voice, impossible, as her mother had died years ago. "Anna, come closer." Her heart pounded as she moved toward the veil, desperate to see the source of the voice. Then she saw them, shadowy figures moving within the swirling snow. Their faces were blurred, their forms shifting and indistinct, but their eyes were unmistakable. They were watching her. The moment Anna crossed the threshold, the world changed. The forest was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of ice and snow. The sky above was a swirling vortex of gray, and the air was thick with the sound of whispers. Anna turned in circles, panic rising as she realized there was no way back. The veil had closed behind her. "Hello?" she called, her voice echoing unnaturally. The shadowy figures appeared again, circling her like predators. This time, they were closer, their features more defined. One of them stepped forward, its face a horrifying amalgamation of human features and something far darker. "You shouldn't have come," it said, its voice a guttural growl. Anna stumbled backward, her camera falling from her hands. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head. "We want what you cannot give. We want freedom." As the hours stretched on, Anna realized the veil wasn't just a physical phenomenon, it was a prison. The shadowy figures were trapped souls, bound to the swirling vortex for eternity. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if the veil itself was alive. It spoke to her in fragments, revealing glimpses of its origins. It was ancient, older than the forest that surrounded it, a tear in reality, a gateway to something beyond human comprehension. And now it wanted Anna. It wanted. Desperate to escape, Anna searched the frozen wasteland for any sign of a way out. The shadowy figures followed her, their movements slow and deliberate. "You can't leave," one of them said, "not without paying the price." "What price?" Anna demanded, her voice trembling. The figure smiled, revealing rows of jagged teeth. "Your soul." Anna ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The landscape around her shifted and warped, the snow rising into impossible shapes. Then she saw it, a faint glow in the distance. She sprinted toward it, the shadowy figures close behind. The glow grew brighter, and she realized it was the edge of the veil. With a final burst of strength, Anna threw herself through the swirling snow. Anna woke in the clearing, the sun shining weakly through the gray sky. The veil was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. Her camera lay in the snow beside her, miraculously intact. When she returned to Frost Hollow, Elias was waiting for her. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. Anna nodded, her hands shaking as she held up the camera. "It's real." Elias sighed. "You're lucky to be alive. Most who enter the veil never come back." Anna left Frost Hollow the next day, but she couldn't leave the experience behind. The footage on her camera was clear proof of the veil, but she couldn't bring herself to watch it. She knew the whispers would haunt her for the rest of her life, and she knew the veil wasn't gone. It was waiting, somewhere in the snow, for its next victim.